Hi, Tracy from Cheese Needs. Now let's have a quick chat about cheese presses. So yes, you can buy a beautiful Dutch lever arch press. It's called a Dutch press, where you put a small amount of weight down here and it transfers through a fulcrum and lever design to give you a big amount of weight here. Fabulous, a little unwieldy, kind of big. So to store that, you can take it to pieces to store it. I make cheese every other day. That's not going to work for me. This is my favorite. This is a spring press. So your cheese goes in here and then you screw these down, and the pressure in this spring here transfers the weight of this bar onto the follower of your mold. Now, you've always got to make sure, steal my mold there. If you press like this, you're not pressing, because you're pressing on the outside of the mold. You're not pressing on the follower. So you have to press like this. So always make sure that you're pressing on your follower, not on the outside of your mold, okay? So if you try and press like that, that's not gonna work for you. So this one comes from Cheese Needs. It's made in BC by a master craftsman, a guy named Chris. And he comes with 2 springs. So initially you're gonna wanna set it up with 1 spring on the central dowel. But if you're making a cheese that needs more pressure than the 50 pounds that the spring is rated for, then you get both springs. So you put a spring on either one of these, and that will then give you the pressure that you're looking for. This comes with a small wooden gauge, which tells you how much pressure you're actually giving incrementally. If you're using 1 spring, then it's in 5 pound increments. If you're using 2 springs, then it's in 10 pound increments. That's all included. When you buy this press, you'll find that in the instructions. So we've got a Dutch press. This will do just about anything. What you need to be aware of, one thing you need to be aware of is this gap. This gap is finite. So almost all of my molds will fit in this one press. My giant Gouda, which is 4.5 kilos, is too wide for this hole. So you can't use that mold if you're using this press. Again, this one has a finite space. So you need to make sure that when you're buying a new mold, or you're buying a press to work with a mold that you already have, that you check what the diameter is. If you've got any questions, shoot me a message. I can measure it for you and let you know. Now, the other thing, the other option is what we call a known weight press. And yes, that is buckets. Buckets are an example of a known weight press. So you take a food grade bucket, put your cheese in the mold. Your follower would be sitting high in the mold. You put your upper bucket in. Now, first, you've sanitized this whole area and you've sanitized the outside of this. You put your second bucket in on top, check that it wobbles. If it wobbles, then you're on the follower. If it doesn't wobble, it just sits still, you're not on the follower, you're on the top of the mold, or your mold is too short and your buckets are just sitting inside each other. You won't get any kind of a press. If you're having a problem with getting mechanical holes or improper pressing, then this is really, really helpful, because you can fill this with hot water and that will keep everything warm, especially if you wrap it up. Otherwise, you can use any kind of weight. Because the weight isn't touching the cheese, it just goes straight in there. It's fine. You can pick these weights up from thrift stores all over the place. There's always weights at my local thrift store. So any kind of weight will work in there. You can use books, bricks, blocks, as I said, hot water, or if you've just made the cheese and you're traveling home from one of my classes, you will have one of these bucket presses, and in the top you will have your milk jug, which is filled with your warm whey from the cheese making process, and that will help to keep the cheese warm enough as it presses on the way home. Okay, so other examples of a known weight press is medieval. Literally, they had a rock, they had a dip in that rock, and they had somehow gouged a channel so that the whey could escape. They would take the cheese in the cheesecloth or whatever they were using at the time, put it in the center, and then they would put a piece of wood or stone on the top, and then they would put a stone that they know the weight of. It's called a known weight press. So they would know that this is the stone that we use for Parmesan, and this is the stone that we use for, I don't know what press is like, Guidos, for instance, medieval Guidos. They would have different sized stones, and there are people in group right now using the exact same principle. Use rock works fine. You can put rocks in your top bucket. As long as these buckets are food grade, you're fine. One other quick thing to mention, when you're using the spring press or the Dutch press, you have your mold inside a plastic container. Don't put your mold directly on this wood because it will get wet, it will swell, it will warp, it will go moldy, it will harbor bacteria. So always have your mold in some kind of a plastic basin. I use a tub from the dollar store. Doesn't have to be expensive. And that was a quick deep dive into cheese presses. As I said, I have all three, clearly. I prefer the spring press. Even though it's the cheaper of the two that I sell, I prefer the spring press because it means I don't have to move heavy weights around the place. I have a shot tendon. So this one actually is my favorite. Let me know which is your favorite in the comments, and thank you for watching. I'm Tracy from Cheese Needs.